Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Success Insight podcast. Our guest today is Patricia Love, and Patricia is returning to the Success Insight podcast because if you'll recall on an episode earlier this year, she was our guest, and we were talking about her soon-to-be-published book, Seen and Unheard, A Little Girl's Journey from Silence to Empowerment. And in talking to Patricia, I really felt it would be a great series to work on with her where she could kind of walk us through, you, the listeners, the process that she has gone through in her life and talk about the events leading up to wanting to write this book and really to share this message of empowerment, because at the end of the day, this is all about empowerment. So once again, and without further ado, Patricia, I want to welcome you back to the Success Insight podcast.
Well, Howard, thanks. This is an honor to be invited back. I'm excited about what we're talking about. I'm excited that we get to do maybe a couple episodes or a few episodes on this seen and unheard type of talk, because it's such a prevalent talk, especially now. It's almost trending, you might say. So I'm excited to be here. So thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. And, it's funny you use the word trending, and I'm reminded of two things. One, that there are hearings going on in Washington right now for President Biden's cabinet nominees. And just the level of, it's not hatred, but I don't know if it's fear or manufactured fear that the women, and especially women of color, are going through right now by, for the sake of better words, a bunch of old white men. Okay. And, I don't like to consider myself old. I'm definitely white. But these are very well qualified women who should be in these positions of power. But, you have bunch of people out there that are just seeking to diminish their credentials. And it's disturbing for me. And your book is just a great opportunity to kind of think about what's really going on underneath the surface, so to speak. And so just, I'd love if you could just provide a little reminder of Seen and Unheard and the reasoning behind the book. And let's start to talk about the steps that women that you see and that you work with in your own practice are using to kind of become seen and be heard.
Yeah, well, exactly. It is trending, and it really, and I hate to say that because I feel it's been trending for years and years and years. You hit the nail on the head. It's fear. It's fear of women being heard. It's fear of women being in charge. It's fear of women being successful, because for some reason, men, and I hate to say it, they're fearful that they're going to lose their jobs to women. And because it's something that they're just not familiar with, and they don't understand it. They don't really get it because they, in most cases, been brought up a certain way. And even the young ones have been brought up a certain way that men are successful, men do the jobs, men do the work, and all that kind of stuff. So women now when they actually have a voice and they're putting that voice out there, it's being criticized, and criticized to the extent that they're trying to reject them. And when they're rejecting them, of course, they're rejecting themselves. It's very hard for women right now to be heard. And the reason I wrote this book is because it starts when they're young. So when, these women and these girls back in the day, they were always told that they weren't good enough and they weren't smart enough. And they needed to listen to their fathers or listen to this and not worry about being heard. And so when they actually get to this point of being in a position of being heard, they got to stand out even more. Yet, even though they're criticized more for exactly the same things that men do, it's like a tug of war. And it's between, the women's inequality and color and everything. And it's right now, it's really big. And I hate the word to say trending in a lot of ways, because trending goes away. And this trend needs to stay, because equality is so important for women of color, for everybody. And that's the first part of that, is having their voices heard and not stepped on as they speak. So that's been the tough one, is because people speak and then they get stepped on.
I love this grounding in what has been this very negative and unhealthy behavior in the past. And do you work on understanding what those behaviors, those habits were in the past, or do you start with developing the habits? Forget about, acknowledge the past, don't dwell on it, but just look to the future? How is that a part of your approach?
Yeah, it's interesting with everything going on with women. It is a struggle, and you can't just say, I'm going to start from here and move forward. We have negative behaviors that we have attached to ourselves, that have attached to us via society, via men, via peers, via whatever, and putting women down into their, what you might say, in their place. So you're not heard, or they're, and then they become fear of being rejected because they're not supposed to say anything, or they're not supposed to step up and be heard because they may be too loud, or they're not good enough, or whatever. So no, it's so important. And in my practice, it's very important to actually figure out and acknowledge what those feelings are. So, because a lot of times it's that inner little girl, or that inner child that's saying, my mom just told me to be quiet. I'm not supposed to be seen or heard. So I guess that's where I should stay. Or when you raise your hand and you don't get called on, because you call on little Tommy instead, because Tommy, he's a guy. So it's all these little things that seem so little that add up. But or the bullying, there can be bullying, because I know when in the past I was bullied and I was told not to basically to shut up, because little girls were seen and not heard. And so you grow up learning, I better not speak, because, I may say the wrong thing and that person won't like me, especially women now who are stepped into successful areas of politics or even of businesses. They still have that inner child in them that says, I got to be a little bit more forceful and step out. And then they get told they're a bitch.
Right. Right.
So, so it's almost like the pendulum has got to go so far again to the right before it can come back to the middle where we're equal. And so we struggle, try to hey, we just want to be heard. We just want you to listen to my thoughts, my ideas, because my thoughts may be good or bad, but at least I want them to be heard. And the same thing as we talked about is we get ridiculed for being a girl and doing certain things, where a man doing exactly the same thing would be put on a pedestal. So it's a real tug of war right now. And so many women's voices. I mean, I've talked to so many of my clients, they're like, I just want to be heard by my husband. I just want to be heard by my boss. But I'm scared to be rejected. So there's a lot of rejection that goes on.
It's interesting in corporate settings, where you have a very diverse workforce, and in meetings, there's a lot of, there's perhaps the obligatory female, the obligatory female of color, the obligatory male of color, the obligatory individual with a gender identity, because they have to be there because it quote unquote looks good,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And what happens is those voices of just sit here and, be our figurehead for this particular issue and speak to it when you're asked, and for everything else, we'll take care of this. And I mean, you see that played out in a lot of
all the time.
And I sense that, this pendulum, as you were talking about it and describing it, that pendulum is definitely moving. But oh my God, there is so much, I should say, distance for that pendulum to have to move, where everybody is comfortable with everybody else,
yes,
and values everyone else.
Yes, it's a pendulum that has to swing. And I mean, it has to go so far, because I got to tell you, in the 60 plus years that I've been around working in this industries and different things and in business, it really has not changed as much as I thought it would change. It really hasn't. There's still that ceiling. There's still that, first off, again, that glass ceiling where women weren't even paid as much, and they still aren't paid as much as some things. I just found out that a lot of insurance companies make women pay more, but we don't step up and say anything, because why? We don't want anybody not to like us. And we were actually taught that. And that's where the people pleasing came, because women are always talked about as being people pleasers, right?
Right.
Because we're rejected in our youth and our such. And so it's a hard road to come back. But you have to build that confidence to come back, because we need more women to really step up and be heard, so that we can get that pendulum farther over, so it can be more equal in the next 50 years.
Right. My sense is, while it is still a struggle, I mean, maybe it's because we have the technology we do, communication, the internet and social media, for all its positives or negatives. We can have a whole conversation about the negativity and the social media. And
right.
but it's the conversation is occurring.
It started. The conversation has started.
It's started. But I sense more of those conversations are starting. It's not just a one-off voice who is shuffled to the back of the room.
No, it's not. There's more and more conversations being had, and there's more women stepping up and stepping forward. But where we really have to have the conversation is when families have children. And so they're not just, well, here's your doll and here's your G.I. Joe. Or here's your computer and here's your baking or chef cooking or whatever. You really have to be more equal as far as allowing your children to do and use what they're gifted for, rather than pushing them in to certain things, which is what happens. They get pushed into roles, and then those roles take over, and they're not supported in the areas that maybe they would excel at it, like math and science. They just excel in the art. They push them into the arts and the crafts. So it's a conversation that really needs to be had more and more and more. And I know it's being talked about more and more and more, but it's still just a blip, little blimp on the big scale of things.
I definitely would concur with that. And I think you could even say, even in corporate America, some of those conversations are starting to occur, because the culture of the organization and really defining what do we want our culture inside our organization to be and look like. And
right.
is that one where it's very, you do exactly what I tell you to do, and if you don't like it, there's the door? Or is it one of conversation and inclusion, and we all are working together for our common goal? So it
has to be the conversation, not only in business, but it has to be the conversation at home too.
Well, I think at home, that's where it has to start. It
has to totally start there, because that gives the confidence to stand up and have your voice heard.
Right.
In the business part. So that's the tough part, because people are still put into roles, and you would think they would have changed, but it's not changed as much as I thought. I was really pretty surprised. Just a good example in real estate, just a quick example. I see that when people are signing contracts, the man always wants to go first, and the woman allows it. Instead of having her name first. It doesn't matter which name is first either way. But I noticed that sometimes they choose the second line, and these are 30-year-olds. So it's a very interesting. So it's the conversation that really needs to be brought up and talked about, having their voices heard in all areas of life.
And so we really need to question the habits that have been formed.
It's the habits of exactly. Right. It's habits that have formed women and formed men. And they just, well, this is how it's done. This is how it is. Well, we need to change that now.
Right. Very
So
good.
it's a tough conversation, and it's a hard conversation for women to get through also, even though they want their voices to be heard. It's a tough one to say, well, I don't want to be that big B. No, you don't need to be. You just need to have confidence to be able to feel it comfortable and not be fearful about knowing that you have something to say. And just whatever you say, it's not wrong.
I love it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I love, again, this to continue this conversation with you on another episode. Let's see how many, we decide to produce, because I think that this is an important message. And I
have a lot to talk about.
I know you do. I know you do. Patricia, before we do head out, where are the best places for our listeners to go and learn more about you and your work?
Actually, the best place to go really is patricialove.com. And actually, if you'd like to sign up to find out when my new book, Seen and Unheard, is being released, it's patricialove.com/new-book-. So love to have you go back. Or there you can go to the Patricia Love, the Rah Coach on Facebook.
Fantastic. Well, we will definitely provide the backlinks to your website, patricialove.com, and to sign up to be notified when the book is released, and also link back to your Facebook. Again, Patricia, it's a pleasure to have you on Success Insight Podcast, and look forward to a future episode.
Absolutely. Look forward to it too.
Fantastic. All right, folks, we have just been chatting with Patricia Love. She is a women's empowerment coach and practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming and emotional freedom technique. And she is the author of the soon-to-be published book, Seen and Unheard, A Little Girl's Journey from Silence to Empowerment. And we hope you enjoyed this short episode to begin to unpack all of the ideas, the insights, concepts in this book, because as we, each conversation Patricia and I will have, and I certainly hope there are more of them, we hope to kind of build and really provide you a path to be seen and heard. And especially our young women out there, whether it's in high school and in college, your first job and career, is really to get the empowerment that you so deserve, and to take ownership of and make of what you want your life to be like. So I'm not going to try to embellish more with this ending. So let's just say, do let us know your thoughts on this episode. You can visit us on successinsightpodcast.com. We're also on Facebook and LinkedIn on our Success Insight podcast pages. Also listen to us on our podcast channels, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast, Amazon Music, and of course on YouTube. All right, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day, and we will see you on the next episode of the Success Insight Podcast. Take care now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.